Ethan Carter walked through the crowded streets of Velria 7, a bustling alien colony filled with creatures from different worlds. The air smelled of strange spices, and glowing signs in unfamiliar languages flickered above the marketplace. He ignored the delicious scents of street food. He had no money to spend. His stomach growled, but he had bigger problems to worry about. Ethan had been an engineer working for a company that specialized in spaceship repairs. But after a corporate merger, he was one of many humans who lost their jobs. Since then, he had been struggling to survive. He was months behind on rent, and his landlord had given him a final warning: pay up or leave. As he walked, lost in thought, he heard a soft humming sound coming from nearby. Looking up, he saw a small silver drone hovering unsteadily in the air. The drone wobbled and sparked as if it was about to crash. A tall alien woman stood beneath it, her purple eyes filled with frustration. She had dark blue skin with silver markings on her forehead, and her long white hair was tied in an elegant braid. She wore a sleek black dress that made her look important, maybe even wealthy. Ethan had seen aliens like her before. She was a Velrian, a noble species known for their advanced technology and strict traditions. The woman tapped on a control panel, but the drone only spun in circles. She sighed in frustration. "Stupid thing," she muttered in a smooth, musical voice. Ethan hesitated. He had always been good with machines, but he wasn't sure if he should get involved. Still, this might be his only chance to earn something. "Need some help?" he asked. The woman turned, surprised. Her purple eyes studied him for a moment before she gestured toward the drone. "You know how to fix this?" Ethan nodded. "I used to work with machines like this before I got fired." She raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Instead, she stepped aside, giving him space. Ethan pulled out a small multi-tool from his pocket and examined the drone. It had a simple problem. One of the stabilizers was misaligned. He adjusted a few wires, tightened a loose screw, and within minutes, the drone stopped spinning and hovered smoothly. The woman's eyes widened in surprise. "You fixed it." Ethan smirked. It wasn't that hard. The drone beeped happily as it returned to her side. She looked at Ethan again, this time with curiosity. "You're human, right?" "Yeah," Ethan replied. "And broke, if that matters." To his surprise, she laughed. It was a soft, pleasant sound. Honest answer. She extended a hand. "I'm Zara Veltrin, daughter of House Veltrin." Ethan shook her hand. Ethan Carter, unemployed engineer. Zara studied him again, her expression unreadable. Then she made an unexpected offer. "I could use someone like you," she said. "Come with me." Ethan frowned. "For what?" She smiled slightly. "Let's talk somewhere more comfortable. You look like you could use a meal." His stomach growled again, as if agreeing with her. Ethan hesitated, but what choice did he have? He had nowhere else to go. "All right," he said finally. "Lead the way." As they walked through the marketplace, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he never expected. Ethan followed Zara through the busy streets of Velria 7, unsure if he was making a mistake. He had learned the hard way that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. But right now, he had nothing to lose. After walking for several minutes, they reached a large floating transport pod parked on the edge of the marketplace. Unlike the worn-out human vehicles Ethan was used to, this one had a sleek, curved design and hovered silently above the ground. Zara stepped inside without hesitation. Ethan hesitated. I don't have credits for a ride." Zara smirked. "It's mine." Ethan blinked. "Oh." Feeling awkward, he stepped inside. The interior was luxurious, with soft seating and glowing control panels. The doors closed, and the pod lifted smoothly into the air. "You don't seem surprised," Zara said, glancing at him. Ethan shrugged. "Figured you were rich the moment I saw you." She chuckled. "Not rich, just from an important family." The pod glided above the city, and Ethan stared out the window in amazement. The towering structures of Velria 7 stretched toward the sky, their metallic surfaces glowing under the light of 3 suns. Ships zipped between landing platforms, and neon signs in multiple languages flickered across buildings. "You've been here long?" Zara asked. 6 months, Ethan said. "Moved here for work. Thought it'd be a fresh start." He sighed. "Didn't go as planned." Zara tilted her head. "You don't have any family here." "No," Ethan admitted. "It's just me." She was silent for a moment before saying, "I understand." Before Ethan could ask what she meant, the transport pod slowed and landed in front of a massive glass mansion on the outskirts of the city. The place was surrounded by floating gardens and shimmering security drones. Ethan stared. "This is your house?" Giara stepped out and gestured for him to follow. "Come inside." The entrance doors opened automatically, revealing a high-ceilinged hall filled with sleek furniture, holographic displays, and floating crystal lights. Ethan had never seen anything like it. A small robotic assistant hovered toward them. "Welcome home, Lady Zara." Zara nodded and turned to Ethan. "You're probably wondering why I brought you here." Ethan folded his arms. "Yeah, rich alien woman picks up a broke human off the streets. Sounds suspicious." Zara laughed. "You're direct. I like that." She walked over to a sleek black table and tapped a glowing control panel. Instantly, a holographic projection appeared, displaying different documents and records. "I don't need a servant," she explained. "I need a companion." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "A companion?" Zara nodded. "My family expects me to marry someone from my species, but I don't want to. I enjoy my freedom. Still, my parents are getting impatient. If they think I have someone in my life, they'll stop bothering me." Ethan frowned. "And you want me?" Zara smirked. "You're a human. That alone makes you different enough to surprise them. Plus, you're intelligent, and you don't seem intimidated by me." Ethan scoffed. "Should I be? Most people are." Ethan looked at her carefully. She seemed confident, maybe even a little arrogant, but he could tell there was something more beneath the surface, something she wasn't saying. He leaned back. "So what's in it for me?" Giara gestured around her. "You'll have a place to live, food, resources, and if you want to work on something, you'll have access to my personal workshop." Ethan's mind raced. A free home. No more worrying about where his next meal would come from. And a fully equipped workshop. It was everything he needed to start fresh. But something still didn't feel right. "What's the catch?" he asked. Zara smiled slightly. "No catch. Just be here. Talk to me. Keep me company. Fix things when I need them fixed." Ethan exhaled. "That's it. That's it." He stared at her, searching for any sign of deception. But Zara's expression remained calm, her purple eyes steady. After a long silence, he finally said, "All right. I'm in." Zara smiled. "Good. Welcome home, Ethan." Ethan wasn't sure if he had just made the best decision of his life, or the worst. But one thing was certain, his life was about to change forever. Ethan sat on the soft couch in Zara's grand mansion, still trying to process what had just happened. A few hours ago, he was broke, struggling to survive in the busy streets of Velria 7. And now he was in a luxurious alien home with a roof over his head and food within reach. It almost felt like a dream. Too good to be true. Zara sat across from him, watching him with curiosity. "You're quiet," she said. "Regretting your decision?" Ethan leaned back, rubbing his chin. "I'm just trying to figure out why you picked me. I mean, you could have chosen anyone." Zara smirked. "I could have. But I like your attitude. You didn't beg or try to impress me. You were just yourself." Ethan let out a small chuckle. "Yeah, well, I wasn't exactly trying to impress anyone." Zara stood up and stretched. "Since you're staying here, let me show you around." Ethan followed her through the wide hallways of the mansion. The walls were made of smooth, shimmering material, reflecting soft blue light. The ceilings were high, and the rooms were spacious, filled with sleek furniture and advanced technology. They stopped in front of a large, circular door that opened with a soft hiss. Inside was a huge workshop, filled with tools, devices, and half-assembled machines. Ethan's eyes widened. This is a full engineering lab," he said in amazement. Ziara grinned. "I knew you'd like it. I checked your records. You were an engineer back on Earth, right?" Ethan turned to her in surprise. "You looked up my records." She shrugged. "I wanted to know who I was bringing into my home, and from what I saw, you were pretty skilled." Ethan shook his head, still trying to process it all. "And you're just letting me use this?" Ziara leaned against the wall. "Think of it as part of our deal. You get a place to stay, and in return, you keep me company. You fix things around the house when needed, maybe even build some interesting gadgets for me." Ethan ran a hand over the workbench, feeling the smooth surface. It had been a long time since he had real tools in his hands. Back on Earth, he had dreamed of working on big projects, designing machines that could change the world. But life had taken a different turn, and now here he was, in an alien mansion with access to more technology than he could have ever imagined. He looked at Ziara. "All right, this might not be such a bad deal after all." Ziara smiled. "Good. Now, let me show you your room." They walked down another hallway until they reached a spacious guest room. The bed was large and comfortable. The walls had a soft glow, and there was even a floating screen displaying different planetary landscapes. Ethan whistled. "This is better than any place I've stayed in my entire life." Ziara crossed her arms. "Then you should have no problem following the rules." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Rules?" Ziara nodded. "Nothing complicated, just a few things to keep in mind." She held up one finger. "First, don't go into my private quarters without permission." Ethan shrugged. "Fair enough." "Second, don't mess with my personal projects in the lab." "Got it." "And third," she paused as if considering her words, "if my family ever contacts me, you play the role of my companion. No hesitation." Ethan smirked. "Oh, so we're really selling this, huh?" Ziara rolled her eyes. "They don't need to know, it's just an arrangement." Ethan nodded. "All right, I'll play along." Ziara extended her hand. "Then we have a deal." Ethan shook it. Deal. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't just drifting through life. Maybe this arrangement was strange, but at least it gave him a chance to rebuild himself. As he lay on his new bed that night, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, he couldn't help but wonder, what exactly had he gotten himself into? Ethan had been living in Ziara's mansion for a few days now. Each day was a mixture of strange luxury and mundane tasks. He'd fix things around the house, help Ziara with some of her projects, and even start working on a few ideas of his own in the massive workshop she provided. But as the days passed, something unexpected began to happen. He started to feel more at home. At first, he thought it was just the novelty of having a place to stay and a steady source of food. But it wasn't just that. It was the way Ziara treated him. There was no condescension, no judgment. She was always direct and straightforward, but there was a kindness in her that made Ethan feel like he belonged, even though he was from a completely different world. One evening, after finishing a small repair in the living room, Ethan found himself sitting on the soft couch, looking out the large windows that stretched across the back wall of the mansion. The view was breathtaking. The three suns were setting in the distance, casting a warm golden glow over the floating gardens below. The sky was a mixture of purple, orange, and pink as the planets in the system shifted into alignment. He hadn't realized how much he had missed seeing the sky. On Earth, the skyline was always full of smog and pollution, but here, everything seemed so pure. Ziara entered the room, breaking his moment of contemplation. She was wearing a long, flowing robe, her silvery hair cascading down her shoulders. "You're quiet again," she said, sitting beside him. Ethan looked at her, surprised by her sudden presence. "Just thinking." She tilted her head. "About what?" He paused for a moment, unsure how to answer. "About how different everything is here. It's beautiful, but it's also overwhelming." Ziara studied him for a moment before speaking softly. "I understand. My life was always planned out for me, every step. But being here, I feel like I can finally make my own choices." Ethan turned to her. "You never wanted to follow the plan." She shook her head. "I've never been the type to follow orders just because someone told me to. But my family, they don't understand that. They want me to follow tradition, to marry someone of my kind, and carry on our family's legacy. They don't see me as an individual." Ethan felt a surge of empathy for her. "I get that. On Earth, I was always told what I should do. But I didn't fit in. I always felt like I was on the outside looking in." Ziara smiled, her eyes softening. "That's why I offered you the deal. You were different. I wanted someone who could see me for who I am, not just who my family expects me to be." Ethan looked down at his hands, feeling a bit vulnerable. "I never expected this kind of life. But it's nice. It feels like I'm actually living for the first time in a long while." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them looking out at the glowing horizon. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a connection that neither of them had anticipated. The peaceful moment was interrupted when Zara's communication device beeped. She glanced at it and sighed. "It's my mother." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're not going to answer, are you?" Zara looked at him with a slight grin. "I would, but I know she'll just ask about my relationship status." Ethan chuckled. "That sounds fun." Zara rolled her eyes. "Not really. I'm sure she'll give me another lecture about how I need to find a suitable partner." Ethan turned back to the window, his mind racing. It wasn't just the tension with her family that made this situation complicated. It was the fact that he didn't have any answers of his own. He was living here, in this beautiful mansion, surrounded by technology and luxury, but he wasn't sure where his life was heading. "What do you want, Ziara?" Ethan asked suddenly. She looked at him, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what do you want out of all of this?" He clarified. "Out of this deal. Out of your life." Ziara was quiet for a moment, her gaze far away. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been living for other people for so long that I don't even know what I truly want anymore. I just want to be free." Ethan nodded slowly. "Freedom. Yeah, I can understand that." They both fell into silence once more, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence full of mutual understanding. Ziara finally broke the quiet. "You're not what I expected." Ethan turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "You're not like the others. You don't seem interested in impressing me or trying to get something from me." She paused. "You're just here. And that's exactly what I needed." Ethan gave her a small smile. "I guess we're both looking for something different." Ziara returned the smile. "Maybe we can help each other find it." As they sat together, the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky. Ethan didn't know where this strange, unexpected partnership was headed, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a real chance at building something meaningful. He wasn't sure if it was the luxury, the mystery, or just the quiet moments he shared with Ziara, but somehow he felt that he was no longer lost. The days had settled into a routine. Ethan continued to help around the mansion, tinkering with various gadgets and working on the projects Ziara suggested. In exchange, he learned more about her life, her culture, and her struggles with her family. Ziara, in turn, started to open up more to him, revealing parts of herself she had long kept hidden. One evening, as they sat together in the garden overlooking the large floating platforms, Ziara seemed more distant than usual. The sun had just set, casting the sky in deep shades of purple and orange. Ethan looked at her, noticing the tension in her posture. "Something on your mind?" Ethan asked gently, trying to ease the silence. Sierra looked at him, her silver eyes clouded with worry. "It's my family. They're pressuring me again," she admitted, her voice soft but firm. "They don't understand why I'm not following their expectations. I can't keep avoiding their calls." Ethan nodded, having heard her mention her family's expectations before. They wanted her to marry someone of her own kind, to continue their lineage, and to take on the family's responsibilities. Sierra had always pushed back against it, wanting to live her life on her own terms. "Have you told them you're happy here?" Ethan asked. Sierra gave a small, bitter laugh. "It wouldn't matter. To them, I'm just a duty to fulfill. My happiness doesn't come into it." She leaned back in her chair, her eyes staring out into the horizon, lost in thought. Ethan shifted closer, trying to offer support without pushing too hard. Maybe they just need time to understand. Sierra didn't respond immediately, and Ethan could see that the weight of her situation was heavy on her shoulders. The conversation had taken a serious turn, and he knew there was more beneath the surface that she wasn't saying. But before he could press her further, a beeping sound interrupted the moment. Sierra's communication device lit up. She glanced at it, her expression immediately turning cold. Ethan watched her closely. "Is it your family again?" Sierra's gaze flicked to the screen, but she didn't answer immediately. After a long pause, she stood up abruptly, her voice quiet but determined. "It's not just my family," she said. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have said earlier." Ethan stood up, following her as she walked toward the lab. "What's going on?" Sierra paused at the entrance, turning to face him. "You remember when I said I wanted to be free? Well, I've been running from my responsibilities for a reason. I'm not just some princess avoiding her duties. There's a threat coming, Ethan, and I've been trying to avoid it for as long as I can." Ethan frowned. "A threat? What kind of threat?" Sierra looked at him, her face serious. "A political one. My family's enemies have been closing in on me for months. They want to take control of our sector. If they get their way, everything I've worked for, everything I've built here, could be destroyed." Ethan's mind raced. "So this isn't just about your family's expectations. There's something much bigger going on." Sierra nodded slowly. "Exactly. I didn't want to drag you into this. You've already done enough by helping me with the projects. But it's getting harder to keep this all under control. I need to be ready for whatever's coming." Ethan felt the weight of her words. The thought of being involved in a political conflict was a lot to process, especially when he hadn't even fully wrapped his head around his new life here. But something about Sierra's determination and the honesty in her eyes made him want to help her, even if it meant facing dangers he hadn't imagined. "So what do we do now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. Sierra paused for a moment before answering. "I need to contact a few allies. People I trust. But I also need your help, Ethan. You've seen the tech around here. You know how to fix things, but I need you to do more than that now. I need you to build something. Something that could protect me and my people." Ethan swallowed. "I can help with that. But what are we talking about here? What kind of protection?" Sierra's eyes darkened. "We need something capable of defending against a fleet of ships. Something that can shield this entire mansion from an attack." She took a deep breath. "I've already started working on some designs, but they're incomplete. I don't have the time to finish them myself. I need you." Ethan felt a surge of determination. He had never built anything on that scale before, but the opportunity to help Sierra and protect her, maybe even help her stop whatever was coming, made him feel like he had a purpose again. "All right," he said, his voice more confident now. "Let's get to work. We can do this." Sierra smiled, a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes. "I knew I could count on you." They both turned toward the workshop, ready to face the challenge ahead. But as they walked into the lab, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. There was something larger at play here, and he had no idea what dangers awaited them. But one thing was clear. He was no longer just a bystander in Zira's world. He was a part of it, and together, they would face whatever came next. The following days were a blur of activity. Ethan worked tirelessly alongside Zira, his mind racing as they designed the shield that could protect the mansion. They studied ancient blueprints from Zira's people and combined them with the latest technology Ethan could remember from his world. The challenge was immense, but Ethan felt more alive than he had in a long time. There was a clear purpose now. Zira didn't waste a single moment either. She stayed focused, her eyes sharp and her movements decisive. Despite the pressure, she still made time to teach Ethan about her culture and the intricacies of her people's politics. But the worry never left her face, and Ethan could see how much she carried on her shoulders. As the days passed, it became clear that the clock was ticking. The shield was taking shape, but the enemy was closing in. Zira's contacts had reported strange movements in their sector, ships appearing on the outer edge of the system. The situation was becoming more dangerous by the hour. One afternoon, as they worked in the workshop, a message arrived. Zira's face turned pale as she read it. "Is it from your family?" Ethan asked, already sensing the tension in the air. Zira didn't respond at first, her fingers trembling slightly as she ran through the message. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "It's from one of my allies. The enemy fleet is getting closer. They'll be here within a few days." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The time they had been preparing for was almost up. "Do you think the shield will be ready in time?" he asked. Zira hesitated, glancing at the half-finished device in front of them. "I don't know, but we have no choice but to try." The two of them immediately got to work, their hands moving in a coordinated rhythm. Every second mattered. With every adjustment they made, the shield grew stronger, but it still wasn't enough to stop a full-on assault. There were still gaps, areas that needed refinement. "I'm going to need to access more power," Zira said, her voice determined. "We're close, but we're still short of energy. The power reserves we've built are not enough for the scale of this shield." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Where can we find more power?" Zira's eyes sparkled with an idea. "The old energy vault beneath the mansion. It's a secret location. My family used it for their most important projects. If we can get to it, we might be able to draw enough power to complete the shield." Ethan stood up immediately, determination clear in his expression. "Let's go." The vault was deep beneath the mansion, hidden from prying eyes. It was protected by layers of security systems, designed to keep even the most skilled invaders out. But with Zira's expertise and Ethan's technical knowledge, they were able to bypass the defenses and make their way down. The air in the vault was cold and sterile. As they stepped inside, the sound of their footsteps echoed through the vast chamber. Rows of high-tech equipment lined the walls, but in the center was the energy core, a massive glowing structure that hummed with raw power. "That's it," Zira said softly, her eyes alight with excitement. "We can tap into that and boost the shield's energy output." Ethan walked toward the core, inspecting the machinery. "I'll need to reroute the power conduits. It won't be easy, but we don't have a choice." Zira stepped aside, her eyes focused on the readouts as Ethan worked. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he carefully connected wires and recalibrated the system. It was delicate work, and every second counted. Zira remained close, offering her expertise when needed but allowing Ethan to take the lead. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan stepped back. "It's done. We have the power we need." Zira smiled, relief flooding her face. "You did it. Now we can finish the shield." They returned to the workshop, their pace quickening. With the additional power now available, they worked together to finalize the shield's design. Every adjustment, every tweak, brought them closer to completing the most important piece of technology Zira had ever built. The shield was nearly ready, but as they worked, the air around them seemed to shift. A low rumble echoed through the mansion, and Zyra's communication device beeped urgently. "They're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The fleet has arrived." Ethan's heart raced. The time for preparation was over. They had to act fast. Zyra's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to slow down. There was no turning back now. The shield had to work, or the mansion, and everyone inside it, would be lost. "Let's do this," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. They activated the shield, watching as the energy coursed through the system. The massive dome that would protect the mansion flickered to life, its bright blue hue casting an eerie glow over the landscape. But just as they thought it was done, the ground shook violently beneath them. The enemy had begun their attack. Zyra's expression hardened. "It's not over yet. We have to hold them off. I need you to stay here and make sure the shield holds." Ethan nodded. He wasn't going anywhere. As the rumble of explosions echoed through the air, he turned to face the control panel, ready to fight back in any way he could. This was no longer just about protecting the mansion. It was about survival. The shield hummed with energy, glowing a bright blue as it enveloped the mansion. Ethan stood at the control panel, his fingers trembling slightly as he monitored the shield's strength. Every second counted now. Outside, the sky was filled with the sound of approaching ships, their engines roaring as they descended toward the mansion. The time for preparation was over. This was the moment they had been waiting for and dreading. Zyra was at his side, her expression focused and unwavering. "This is it. We need to make sure the shield stays intact. If it goes down, we won't have another chance." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The shield was their only defense. Without it, the mansion, and everyone in it, would be vulnerable. He adjusted the settings on the panel, double-checking everything. The energy levels were high, but he knew the shield couldn't take an endless barrage. They needed to hold off the attackers long enough to either drive them back or wait for reinforcements. "You've done everything you could," Zyra said softly, her voice a mix of gratitude and determination. "Now we need to trust it." Outside, the enemy fleet was closing in. Massive warships hovered above, their weapons ready to strike. Ethan could see the silhouette of the first ship, its enormous size casting a shadow over the mansion as it prepared to fire. The countdown to impact began in his mind, each second stretching out into eternity. And then the first blast came. A bright beam of energy shot from the enemy ship, striking the shield with a force that sent a ripple through the air. The shield shimmered but held firm. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he watched the powerful blast collide with the dome, the light dancing across its surface. The shield held. For now. Zyra clenched her fists at her sides. "It's working. But we need more. I'll go out and try to buy us more time." "No," Ethan said quickly, grabbing her arm. "You can't. It's too dangerous." She met his eyes, her gaze unwavering. "I can do this. I have to." Before Ethan could protest further, she slipped from his grasp and dashed toward the door. She was determined, and Ethan knew there was no stopping her once she had made up her mind. He could only hope she would be able to hold her own against the invaders. As she left the mansion, Ethan returned his attention to the control panel. The enemy was relentless. A second ship opened fire, and then a third. The shield began to flicker, its energy levels dropping with each hit. He adjusted the power, rerouting reserves from other systems, but the attacks kept coming, one after another. The shield was being tested like never before. Zyra was outside now, moving with precision. Her people had trained her for combat, and she wasn't about to let the mansion fall without a fight. She used her agility and strength to her advantage, darting between the wreckage and using the cover to her advantage. Her weapons, though not as advanced as those of the enemy, were lethal in her hands. She fired back, taking down one enemy soldier after another. Ethan could see it all on the screen in front of him. Zyara's movements, her fierce determination. But with each passing minute, more enemies arrived. The odds were stacked against her, but she didn't falter. Back inside the control room, Ethan's mind raced. The shield was weakening. He could see it in the readings. If the shield went down, the mansion would be defenseless. He had to do something. His hands flew across the control panel, inputting commands, trying to strengthen the shield for the final push. Then something unexpected happened. A flash of light erupted from above, blinding Ethan for a moment. He quickly regained his composure and looked up at the screen. It was a ship, Zyara's allies, arriving just in time. The fleet, massive and imposing, began to unleash its own firepower against the enemy ships. The attackers, caught off guard by the reinforcements, hesitated for just a fraction of a second. That was all Zyara needed. She pressed forward, using the confusion to take out even more of the enemy forces. With the reinforcements distracting the invaders, she made her way to their leader, a tall, armored figure commanding the fleet. She had him in her sights. Back in the control room, Ethan couldn't help but watch as the situation unfolded. The shield was holding strong now, but the battle was far from over. He could feel the weight of the moment, the pressure mounting, but there was still hope. Zyara confronted the leader. "This ends now," she shouted, her voice fierce as she pointed her weapon directly at him. The leader sneered, his hand reaching for his own weapon. But before he could strike, the reinforcements unleashed a devastating blast, knocking him off balance. In that instant, Zyara rushed forward, disarming him and taking him down with a swift, decisive move. It was over. The enemy forces began to retreat, their leader captured, and their morale shattered. The reinforcements from Zyara's people had turned the tide. Back at the mansion, Ethan breathed a sigh of relief as the final ships retreated into the distance. The battle had been won, but the victory came at a cost. The shield was nearly depleted, and the mansion was in ruins, but it was still standing. And so were they. Zyara walked back toward the mansion, her expression weary but triumphant. Ethan rushed to meet her, his heart racing. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Zyara smiled, her eyes tired but glowing. "We did it." The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. They had won this fight, but there would be more challenges ahead. Together, they had proven that no matter the odds, human and alien could stand united. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a sense of hope. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was living.